Today we're going to dive into the incredible story of how a single shipwreck accidentally created a philosopher named Zeno of Citium, and with him, one of history's most practical and enduring philosophies, Stoicism.
But first, let me ask you something. What if you lost it all? I mean, everything. Your money, your career, everything you've worked for. For most of us, that would be the end of the story. But for one man, believe it or not, it was just the beginning.
Yeah, we're talking about a guy whose entire fortune literally sank to the bottom of the sea. But out of that one single catastrophic event, a whole philosophical revolution was born. This is the amazing, unlikely origin story of Stoicism. Okay, so let's set the scene. Meet Zeno of Citium. He was born in Cyprus around 334 BC, the son of a wealthy merchant. Life was good, business was booming, and then a shipwreck near Athens changed absolutely everything.
This timeline really shows you just how fast his world completely flipped. Around 312 BC, he survives the wreck, but he's left with nothing. He ends up wandering into an Athenian bookshop, and there he reads a book about the life of Socrates. He's so blown away that he asks the bookseller, "Where can I find men like that?" And the bookseller just points out the door to a man walking by, the famous philosopher Crates. And just like that, Zeno's new life began. A little over a decade later, he was the one people were seeking out for wisdom.
So that search for a teacher led him straight to Crates of Thebes, who was the most famous and probably most eccentric cynic philosopher of his time. And this was going to be Zeno's first, and let's just say most challenging, dive into the wild world of Greek philosophy.
You can imagine Zeno was in for a major culture shock. His new teacher, Crates, decided he needed to cure Zeno of his polite, merchant-class modesty. So what does he do? He makes Zeno carry a clay pot full of lentil soup through a crowded public square. Zeno, totally embarrassed, tries to hide the pot under his cloak, so Crates just smashes it with his staff, drenching Zeno's legs in soup. As Zeno runs off, humiliated, Crates yells this line at him, a harsh lesson, for sure, but an unforgettable one about not caring what other people think.
But here's the thing, Zeno wasn't just a copycat. He was deeply influenced by the Cynics for sure. He embraced their simple lifestyle and the core idea that virtue is the only thing that's truly good. But he just couldn't get on board with their extreme shamelessness. He thought, maybe we can work with society's rules instead of just trashing them completely.
And Zeno was a real synthesizer, which was actually pretty revolutionary back then. See, in Athens, philosophical schools were like rival sports teams. You picked one and you stuck with it. But not Zeno. He studied with the Cynics, yeah, but he also learned logic and paradoxes from the Megarian school. And he dug into the ideas of Plato's Academy. He was basically taking the best ideas from all the major players and putting them together. So after years and years of studying, Zeno was finally ready. He started teaching his own ideas, not in a fancy academy, but in a public space called the Stoa Poikile, or the Painted Porch. And it's from that very porch, the Stoa, that his followers got their famous name, the Stoics. And what he taught wasn't just a random collection of thoughts. It was this beautiful, unified system built on three interconnected pillars. His whole idea was that to understand how to live a good life, you first had to understand how to think clearly, and then you had to understand the nature of the universe itself. Pillar number one was logic. For Zeno, this wasn't about winning debates. It was a defense mechanism. It was the essential tool you needed to avoid being fooled by others or by your own mind. You can think of it as the protective wall built around the garden of his philosophy. And Zeno had this brilliant way of explaining how we gain knowledge, using just his own hand. Okay, so imagine this. An open hand, that's perception, an impression hitting your senses. Now you slightly close your fingers, that's assent. You're agreeing that the impression is probably true. A closed fist, that's comprehension. A firm grasp he called catalepsis. But true, unshakable knowledge, that's when your other hand grabs that fist. It's a level of certainty that's almost impossible to break. The second pillar was physics. And this is where things get really cosmic. For Zeno, the entire universe was one single, living, divine thing. The universe was God. And he believed everything was guided by what he called a divine artisan fire, or logos. Basically a universal reason that we might just call fate. And all of this, the clear thinking from logic, the understanding of a rational universe from physics, it was all leading somewhere. It was building towards the ultimate goal, the reason for the whole system, ethics. This is where it all comes together, to answer the big question.
How should we actually live? So what was the point of it all? Zeno called the goal eudaimonia, and he defined it with this beautiful phrase, a good flow of life. This is so important. Happiness for a Stoic isn't about chasing pleasure or avoiding pain. It's about living with virtue, living in perfect harmony with the rational way the universe works.
At the very heart of Stoic ethics is this really radical idea. Virtue is the only good. That's it. Everything else, your health, your wealth, your reputation, even being alive, all of that stuff is what they called indifferent. They're not good or bad in themselves. The only thing that truly matters is your character.
Now, this is where a lot of people get Stoicism wrong. They think it's about being an emotionless robot, right? Nope. Zeno taught that we should work to get rid of the negative, irrational passions, things like irrational fear or obsessive desire. But the goal was to replace them with positive, rational emotions, a steady will, a healthy sense of caution, and a deep, unshakable joy.
So let's just step back for a second. From a shipwrecked merchant came a philosophy that would go on to shape Western civilization, influencing everyone from Roman emperors to modern-day psychologists. It's an incredible legacy.
He didn't just start a school, he gave it its entire intellectual architecture: logic, physics, and ethics. He came up with these core concepts like the logos and catalepsis, and he developed the idea of fitting actions, the daily duties that help us live in line with our rational nature. He basically laid the foundation for a system that would stand for centuries.
And you want to know how much he was respected in his own time? When he died, the people of Athens, the city that had taken him in as a penniless survivor, built a tomb for him and gave him a golden crown. Their inscription compared him to Cadmus, the mythical hero who gave the Greeks the alphabet. Zeno, they said, had given them the alphabet for living a good life. Which really leaves us with one final question, one that brings Zeno's ancient wisdom crashing right into our modern world. The Stoics believed that real happiness comes from living in harmony with the course of events. So the question for you and for me is, what does that actually mean today? How can you live in tune with the way things are, right here, right now?